Hello, my friend. We're going to talk about the Razzies today here on Media Atrocities. I'm Lew Ojeda, and let's go over the Razzie nominations for 2024. I'm going to choose what I think should be the winners, or I guess the losers, of each category. And afterwards, we'll talk a little bit about some of the films I did not choose along with trends that might have happened with some of the Razzie films in 2023. Okay, first we're going to go to the nominees for Worst Remake, Ripoff, or Sequel. And the nominees are Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, The Exorcist Believer, Expendables, if that's the way they want to spell it, then that's the way I'm going to say it, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. My choice here for the very worst remake, ripoff, or sequel is The Exorcist Believer. The reason why I chose this one over the other ones is because we've already had two failed sequels for The Exorcist. None of them, including this one, came anywhere close to the very first Exorcist, the classic film directed by William Friedkin. There was nothing to be gained by doing it, and just about everything else to lose. Next are the nominations for Worst Screenplay, and the nominees are The Exorcist Believer, Expendables, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And my choice this time around was, well, what do you know? The Exorcist Believer. One of the problems with trying to make a sequel for an iconic horror film is if you make the mistake of referencing the great original film. The Exorcist Believer does that intentionally and repeatedly with little Easter eggs that they leave all over the film. These are not self-referential bits. It makes the film basically a remake. The one thing that kept going through my mind with The Exorcist Believer was just how incredibly inferior it was to the original. In fact, William Friedkin mentioned before he died shortly before the release of Exorcist Believer, he said that he would come back and haunt the filmmakers because he felt that the film was going to be so terrible, and he ended up being very, very right. Now let's take a look at the nominees for the worst screen combo. The nominees are any two merciless mercenaries for Expendables, any two money-grubbing investors who donated to $400 million for remake rights to The Exorcist Believer, Ana de Armas and Chris Evans for Ghosted, Salma Hayek and Channing Tatum for Magic Mike's Last Dance, and Pooh and Piglet as bloodthirsty slasher killers in Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I actually came up with a tie for this. I chose the money-grubbing investors buying the remake rights for The Exorcist Believer, and Ana de Armas and Chris Evans for Ghosted. And let me explain this for a moment. In a way, I kind of wish that the investors were not chosen for a nominee for worst screen combo, because that could certainly happen for any investors in many of these movies. But I couldn't resist choosing it simply to make a point. Yes, investors should be very wise as to what they should allow their money to go to. Certainly when someone comes up with the idea of funding an incredibly unnecessary movie like The Exorcist Believer. But let's go to Ana de Armas and Chris Evans. Screen chemistry, or lack thereof, in Ghosted is really amazing and something to behold. I have rarely seen in any movie two actors who look like they're talking past each other. In this movie, where the chemistry is supposed to be key, as there's supposed to be a romance going on in this action comedy, it really is stunning and striking, especially since both De Armas and Evans are listed as executive producers of this film. And this film does not make either of them look very good. Let's move on next to the nominations for Worst Supporting Actress. The nominees are Kim Cattrall in About My Father, Megan Fox for Expendables, Bai Ling in Johnny and Clyde, Lucy Liu in Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and Mary Stuart Masterson in Five Nights at Freddy's. For this category, I had to choose Megan Fox for Expendables. Megan Fox, unfortunately, is not very convincing as someone who's supposed to be very tough and a leader of a bunch of roughnecks for the Expendables, which is a waste of talent, of many talents, including that of Megan Fox as well. But she was completely unconvincing in this. Some notables here were Kim Cattrall and Mary Stuart Masterson, both of whom I think are very good actresses, but they overact, each of them, in their roles. Let's move on to Worst Supporting Actor, and here are the nominees. Michael Douglas in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Mel Gibson in Confidential Informant, Bill Murray in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Franco Nero in The Pope's Exorcist, and perennial Razzie favorite Sylvester Stallone in Expendables. Okay, my choice was Bill Murray for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and this was actually an easy choice for me because Bill Murray probably gave one of the very worst performances I've seen, and I think of any film last year, but definitely the worst performance of any actor nominated for a Razzie this year. His appearance was not funny. He was sorely miscast. It was really horrendous casting here. And he kind of burned a hole in the screen in a very bad way. I really wanted to hope that the character was erased from the screen. I mean, the whole film should have been erased, in my opinion. Since it was just a terrible film throughout. But his performance in particular, I think, was really sad to see. Next are the nominations for Worst Actress. Ana de Armas for Ghosted, Megan Fox for Johnny and Clyde, Salma Hayek for Magic Mike's Last Dance, Jennifer Lopez for The Mother, and Helen Mirren for Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I hate to say that I'm picking on Megan Fox, and I don't want to seem like I am, but I have to be honest here. Of all of them that I've seen, and they were all bad. Let's be certain about that, except for one. I really did not think Salma Hayek was that bad in Magic Mike's Last Dance. Yes, I believe she was miscast, but I think she did the best that she could. She didn't irritate me, say like Kim Cattrall did and Mary Stuart Masterson did in About My Father and Five Nights at Freddy's, respectively, for their nominations. My choice was among four, and really, with the four, I have to choose Megan Fox again for Johnny and Clyde. In this particular movie, she plays the head of a casino who has a penchant for shooting people right between the eyes, right in front of them. And there's almost a drinking game that you could make out of this because she I forget how many times she does this. It has to be like a half a dozen times. The movie doesn't deserve her because Johnny and Clyde, quite honestly, looked like it was made in less time than it took to watch it. I was just astounded that she would even be in this particular movie. But even here, she's just, once again, she's not convincing. I don't have anything against her personally. I'm sure she's better than this, but please. All right, let's go on to the nominations for Worst Actor. Nominees are Russell Crowe for The Pope's Exorcist, Vin Diesel for Fast X, Chris Evans for Ghosted, Jason Statham for Meg 2: The Trench, and Jon Voight for Mercy. This one was actually a little bit easy for me as well. I chose Chris Evans for Ghosted. He might as well have been a ghost in this movie and just not appeared, since he was one of the executive producers of the movie. This made him look embarrassing. He tried his best to do his Ryan Reynolds impersonations, and it didn't go well. In fact, Ryan Reynolds makes an appearance in Ghosted in a cameo, and at the moment that he showed up, it made me wish the entire movie was about his character. There was a really bad screenplay to go along with this too, so I almost wish there was a sixth nominee for worst screenplay and it went to Ghosted. The chemistry, or lack of, between Diarmas and Evans made them bicker like they were part of the Bickersons, and it was really just annoying to have to completely sit through. All right, let's go to the nominations for Worst Director. The nominees are Reese Waterfield for Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, David Gordon Green for The Exorcist Believer, Peyton Reed for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Scott Wall for Expendables, and Ben Wheatley, Meg 2: The Trench. I chose David Gordon Green for The Exorcist Believer, and it's starting to become kind of a sweep for The Exorcist Believer for the Razzies for me. I did choose it as the worst film of the year, or the turd of the year, in my podcast, The Treasures and Turds of 2023, in which we went over the best and worst films of 2023 with my cohort, Tyler Pistorius, and we talked about David Gordon Green in this. Coming in close would have been Peyton Reed, I feel, because both of these films I just stopped watching after a while. I just couldn't handle it anymore. But I got far enough into both of them where I was able to discern what was right and what was wrong for it. But David Gordon Green, I think, deserves it more because instead of being a Marvel Universe project that gets assigned to you, this is something, I'm not sure if he was forced to make it, but it's certainly something that he should have known he should have passed on. Let's go to the big one. The nominees for Worst Picture. The nominees are The Exorcist Believer, Expendables, Meg 2: The Trench, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and Winnie the Pooh: Blood and Honey. Well, far be it for me to give The Exorcist Believer the awards for loser in other categories and not grant it for Worst Picture. This is, for me, pretty much a sweep for The Exorcist Believer for all the reasons I mentioned before, along with the fact that this was probably the most unnecessary film out of the five to have to make. there's just no reason in the world ever to make another sequel for The Exorcist when they've failed numerous times before. So there was no choice for me. It was absolutely all the way The Exorcist Believer, the worst film of the Razzie nominees, and my choice for the worst film of 2023. Those are my choices for the losers in the Razzies. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, I mentioned a couple of times, and that was rather useless, and it's a film that doesn't know how to build tension. Of all the films that I've seen this year, if there was any one film where I would say definitely get a DVD or Blu-ray of that film because it's worth having for a great laugh, I would say it's the film called Mercy. One of the films that has the most inept mob portrayals in any non-comedy movie in history. It really is amazing at what lengths this goes to. A group of Irish mobsters, led by Jon Voight, would take over a 3-story hospital. Trust me, it is a great laugh. It's kind of like The Rakin from last year with Alicia Silverstone, which I mentioned is the most hilarious bad film of last year. This, I think, is the funniest bad film of this of 2023. Okay, I want to talk a few minutes about trends among the Razzie nominees. The first that I noticed was that superhero and action movies are starting to fatigue a lot of audiences. So we've seen in 2023 that a number of films have not done well at the box office. Ant-Man was one of them. Shazam! Fury of the Gods was another one. The Flash was another one. And even going into 2024, we're seeing Madam Web and the Marvels and not performing to expectations. Next, also, horror sequels of legendary movies are generally a bad idea, and the big ones this year, for this past year, were The Exorcist Believer and Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, for reasons that I've already mentioned. If you've got an idea for taking a character that's now in public domain and making a horror version of it, probably not a good idea. For iconic horror films, don't make any sequels. Watching some of the Razzies gave me a deeper appreciation at how good an action comic actor Ryan Reynolds is. There have been a number of films in which people tried to be like Ryan Reynolds. I would say in films like Ghosted and Expendables 4, especially, but you really can't match him. And once again, like I say, he appeared in a cameo in Ghosted. I wish the whole film was about him. I also mentioned that there was rampant miscasting among these Razzie movies. Megan Fox, Bill Murray, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Mary Stuart Masterson, Kim Cattrall. I should mention Jon Voight among them too. There's something about this issue with federal agents. These federal agents in these movies are supposed to be conspiratorial. They're supposed to be working against you. They're supposed to be very organized and very tough, and at the same time very dumb and not knowing enough about certain characters. So for instance, the big one this year was in the Jennifer Lopez movie The Mother, where she has to explain her whole story to this federal agent who's supposed to have already known. Why doesn't he already know her entire backstory? Along those same lines, you get characters with hidden paramilitary backgrounds, and Jennifer Lopez's character is kind of like that in The Mother, where she kind of surprises people that she's this paramilitary expert, and 8 months, 9 months pregnant at the time. Also, Mercy, in which a nurse is found out to have a paramilitary background, and she's even actually asked, "Why didn't you tell us about it?" It's like, it's a good question. If you had all of this paramilitary experience, you would think that you would want to put this on your resume and want companies to know, so you would be able to get a job that suits you. But I guess you wanted to be a nurse more than you wanted to be a kick-ass paramilitary trooper. But I guess those come in handy when you have to fight the Irish mob. Finally, I've noticed that a number of Razzie movies were anticlimactic for some reason. Fast X had the Vatican being threatened at one point, and you would think that that is the climax of the movie, but it is not. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, Christopher Robin is introduced at the very beginning of the movie, seen as a victim of torture in the middle of the movie, and they save him for the very end of the movie. And in the middle, you introduce, five female characters, all of whom are murdered. Absolutely pointless introduction of characters. They're completely meaningless to the story, except the fact that you want to have an excuse to chase after young women and brutally kill them. Not anticlimactic and not a good idea. Just a horrible idea. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please support Media Atrocities. You can see the link in the banner right here. linktr.ee/Lew Ojeda, LEWOJEDA, and that gives you the links to everything for contacting me about Media Atrocities. I'm on Facebook with Media Atrocities and on YouTube, so please subscribe, and we will see you very soon. Thanks for watching.